Apocalypse Gaming.
Hi team, hope you're all well. Cheers. This is my video response to Dread Lunn and his why do you play the genre you play? And I thought it was a great question, but what I enjoyed more was the way he presented it. Because many times when it comes to why do you play what you play, you hear it becomes a slating match of mine's is better than yours because yours is shite, you cunt. And it's not about that. It's about reasons for enjoyment. And Brother Lunn really presented it well without getting into any of that sort of crap that you often hear. It's like the Star Trek Star Wars argument, and Star Wars wins. But why do I play fantasy style stuff rather than historical? I loved the fact that Dread talked about the fact that he grew up watching many sorts of war style stuff and things like that. But so did I. I grew up loving all sorts of war style movies. I grew up running around playing soldiers. There's a photo of me that you're not going to get to see. There's a photo of me hiding in the bush with my camel, which I'm blatantly obviously and stand out a mile, but for me and my childlike brain, I was completely hidden in my camel with my belt fed toy gun. So I grew up liking proper military stuff, but I also grew up indoctrinated with Star Wars. Star Wars movie, for a couple of years I watched it every day, and I'm not kidding, I actually watched it every day that I came home from school. I burnt out 4, maybe 5 VHS cassettes of Star Wars. So I've got a strong liking of both historical stuff and fantasy stuff, but I don't play historical wargaming. I get into the hobby through role playing, and I played fantasy style role playing first. When I come to read novels, I don't read sci-fi, I read fantasy, and it's probably useful for me to differentiate fantasy, sci-fi and historical. Although Dread has put it down as do you play fantasy, he's really tying in all sci-fi and all fantasy together. To me there's a differentiation. There's actually 3 topics. There's historical, and then you can break the historicals down to various different types of histories, and then there's fantasy and sci-fi. I feel a differentiation there is between them. When it comes to the playing side, I lean more towards the fantasy. Why do I do that? I think it's due to novels. When it comes to reading about things, I love history, particularly World War II. I've got a real hard on when it comes to learning about World War II. But when it comes to reading for escapism, then it's the fantasy side. And I see my wargaming, role-playing, modelling as escapism for me. And if it was historical, I would be trying to recreate the things as they happened. Where I can see an exception to that would be bolt action, because bolt action I see as more of a skirmish style game, whereas things like Flames of War and your mass battles with your 15mm and 6mm scales is recreating battles that already happened, and that doesn't get me excited. On my role playing side, we played sci-fi, we played fantasy, and we played historical. The historical side was things like Boot Hill, though, which was cowboys and Indians. We did play it with real life weaponry, though, in Twilight 2000, which was set in the near future, so it was still proper tanks, proper guns, blah blah blah, nothing fantastical about it. But the most enjoyment that I've had, and the most enjoyment that I get, is the escapism side, where it's something totally different from what we're experiencing in our world, or what we could experience in our world, whether that be orcs, goblins, dwarfs, whether that be power armour and spaceships. That's where I get the thrill, that's where I get the enjoyment. It's the same way when it comes to the painting and things like that as well. It's where I get the thrill and where I get the enjoyment, is that totally fantastical experience, rather than trying to recreate something that exists in reality. Even putting your own slant on it, when it's the recreation of something that exists in reality, I don't get as much a kick. I still love my scale modelling, which is where I probably get that hit. But actually moving around a table, I don't get as much a hit. But I can see me possibly liking bolt action, but I'd probably still go down the alternate route of a dust, where it was something changed, a what if scenario. What if the Germans wins? I think it is how dust works. So I'd probably still end up, even with looking to possibly play a historical scenario, not do that. The most historical scenario we've got in the house would be Empire of the Dead, but it ain't very historical. All it is, it's set in 1888, but it's a very steampunk world. So overall, pretty much everything that I lean towards is fantasy. The reasons are many and varied, but overall I think it's the escapism is my biggest reason. Escapism from the factual side. Yes, I love my war history. I'm a total rivet counter and bullet counter when it comes to guns. There was at one point in my life that there was probably not a fact out there that I didn't know about guns due to the role-playing side. We as a role-playing group devoured every little bit of knowledge we could about any firearm, explosive or military piece of hardware we could in the world. But it's not what I want to do as a wargamer. And I think it's that I love the escapism of, let's get an elven army out, let's get a dwarven army out, let's get an orc, chaos, blah 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 army out. And I hope that's made some sense. As I say, I'm a little bit drunk, but if you want pure honesty from someone, ply them with drink. And I've waited till I had the drink in this one to try and give this as heartfelt as possible, because I think Brother Lunn deserved it, because he presented his argument so well. And that's pretty much my reasons. So hopefully that made sense. Hopefully I've not come across like a drunken fool. If I have, tell me. But Slange.
Apocalypse Gaming.